Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I'd like to thank my colleagues in the Democratic Litigation and Response Task Force for helping us with this various special order hours, discussing the Trump administration's various reckless actions. And tonight, I rise to bring attention to an issue that really should have all Americans on alert, which are President Trump's tariff policies. Since the beginning of this administration, American businesses, manufacturers, and families have been stuck in limbo as the Trump administration has repeatedly threatened, then implemented, then paused, then restarted tariffs, creating uncertainty and instability. The most recent policy shift, a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico, has been fraught with delays and exemptions, leaving American businesses, manufacturers, and consumers just stuck in limbo, not knowing how to react and how to make their plans. In fact, just this morning, Trump doubled planned tariffs on steel and aluminum from Canada to 50%. And then a mere couple hours ago, a spokesman from the White House said that the tariffs on Canada were back down to 25%. You know, who knows? In true Trump administration fashion, this is complete and utter chaos. But the truth is, these tariffs, no matter if and when they go into full effect, whether it's this week or next month, they'll all ultimately have the same result: higher prices for everyday goods and a less competitive U.S. manufacturing sector. In fact, a business in my district just let me know that it's a business that makes precision-formed steel tubing components. And they told me that the price of hot-rolled steel is up 33% since Trump's inauguration in anticipation of these tariffs. And there is just no way that they're going to be able to avoid passing these inflationary price increases onto their customers. According to an analysis from the Yale Budget Lab, if implemented fully, these tariffs would cost the average American family between $1,600 and $2,000 a year, with working-class families who can least afford it being hit the hardest. Prices would spike across the board. Electronics like computers, phones, and TVs could rise by 11%. Clothing up by 7.5%. Cars and auto parts up by 6%. Groceries up 2%, and with fresh produce rising nearly 3%. Oil and other energy costs will rise over 1.6%, making it more expensive for families to fill up their gas tanks and heat their homes. Now, Trump is trying to spin these tariffs as something that is solely a tax on foreign companies, but history and macroeconomic facts tell us otherwise. When Trump first imposed tariffs during his first administration, it was not other countries that paid, it was American consumers and businesses. Importers passed these cost increases onto their consumers, and domestic producers hiked their own prices in response. This made U.S. manufacturers less competitive worldwide. In fact, in the last administration, Trump's policies put us into a manufacturing recession well before COVID hit. And beyond hurting hard-working American families, these tariffs threaten the stability of our economy. Analysts from across the political spectrum warn that they could slash 2.3% from GDP by 2026, wiping out a lot of projected growth. Markets also reacted with great uncertainty, as they should. Stocks have dropped and consumer confidence is cratering. And for American farmers, many of whom are already facing mounting economic challenges, the situation is even more dire. The cost of critical supplies, such as fertilizer, fuel, and equipment, will skyrocket, making it harder for farmers to maintain their operations. You know, I was just at an event earlier today with corn farmers from the Midwest. And for example, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, Canada supplies over 80% of our potash imports, which are an essential component for agricultural fertilizer. Now, guess who the next leading producers are after Canada? Russia, China, and Belarus. Now, wouldn't it be better if we could import from our friends in Canada instead of Russia, China, and Belarus? Or does our president feel differently? In any case, with increased costs, farmers will be forced to either raise prices or absorb the losses, neither of which is sustainable in the long run. And besides rising costs, farmers are already facing devastating losses in international markets. China, the largest export market for U.S. food products, has already announced retaliatory tariffs on key American agricultural goods, including wheat, corn, soybeans, pork, and dairy products. Mexico, our largest corn export market, well, they know what they'll be doing because they did it last time. When Trump did various things to insult the people of Mexico and assault their economy, they simply stopped buying corn from the United States and began borrowing it from Brazil, buying it from Brazil. Brazil, by the way, gets 2 crops a year, which when you tell that to corn farmers in the Midwest, they react. So we're in danger of losing these markets permanently if Trump continues what he did in his last go-around on tariffs. According to the USDA, in fact, in the last time President Trump engaged in a trade war, it cost U.S. farmers nearly $30 billion in lost sales and market disruptions. And so in an effort to keep the farmers' heads above water, $30 billion of taxpayer money was sent their way. You know, that's not what farmers want. For decades, American farmers have worked tirelessly to expand access to foreign markets, ensuring their products reach consumers around the world. These new tariffs will undo years of progress in expanding those markets, closing off opportunities and shrinking demand for American-grown goods in the foreign market, something which domestic consumption alone cannot compensate for. And finally, Mr. Speaker, manufacturing. You know, long before coming to Congress and long before my career as a scientist, I started a manufacturing company with my brother. And starting with $500 from our parents, we built a company that now manufactures over half of all the theater lighting equipment in the United States. It provides over 1,300 manufacturing jobs in the Midwest. We do hardware, software, painting, wiring harnesses, customer support, everything. And I'm very proud that we've kept those good manufacturing jobs in the United States. And that's why boosting U.S. manufacturing and creating manufacturing jobs here has always been a top priority of mine, and why I was so horrified at the damage done to U.S. manufacturing by the last set of Trump tariffs. So I watched with deep concern as the first Trump administration's tariffs and our other trade policies put us in a manufacturing recession a year before COVID even started. Once again, Trump is pursuing a failed economic policy that was going to do nothing to bring jobs back, but instead it will drive up costs, kill growth, and undermine U.S. manufacturing, the very sector that he claims to protect. Manufacturers will be hit with soaring costs. Many U.S. manufacturers rely on imported raw materials such as steel, aluminum, auto parts from Canada and Mexico, and these tariffs will increase cost across the supply chains, making it harder to produce goods economically and much, much harder for U.S. manufacturers to export their goods in a competitive world environment. So contrary to what Trump and the Republicans are trying to say, higher cost means fewer jobs. When manufacturers face rising production expenses, they're forced to either pass those costs on to consumers, further driving up inflation, or cut jobs in production. Studies have shown that Trump's previous tariffs led to job losses, not gains, in the manufacturing sector. American manufacturers will once again struggle to compete globally. By making essential inputs more expensive, Trump is weakening U.S. manufacturers against foreign competitors who are not burdened with these artificial price hikes. Not to mention, manufacturers will likely to be hit by retaliatory tariffs when they're trying to export their goods to the countries that President Trump has targeted. This is not America first. This is America last in the global economy. The last trade war was a disaster. Under Trump's first round of tariffs, manufacturers suffered as input prices soared, supply chains were disrupted, and retaliatory tariffs from other nations crushed U.S. exports. And this time, the consequences could be even worse. The truth is, there are no winners in trade wars, only those left to bear the burden of higher costs, lost jobs, and economic instability. Instead of strengthening our economy, Trump and his Republican allies are needlessly putting at risk, gambling with the livelihoods of American families. And so when the U.S. is threatened with a recession, you don't have to take my word for it. You can read the front page of the Wall Street Journal. It will be those policies who are to blame. And next, I'm glad to be joined by my colleague, Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury. As a representative of a southern border state, New Mexico, she knows all too well the importance of fair trade with Mexico for our nation's economy, and especially for working families' wallets. And with that, I now yield to the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Stansbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for convening this special order hour. And I rise today to talk about the real-world impacts of what's happening right now in our federal government, with the dismantling of federal agencies, the free fall of our economy, and the impacts that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are having on our communities. Because what is happening right now is not normal, and it is impacting our communities in ways that many do not even understand. Right now, real people are hurting. They are scared. They don't know what's going to happen. Today in my office, I met with members of a tribal council and leaders from a tribe in New Mexico who came to visit me. Like others, they shared stories about the people in the community who are frightened about what is happening. Teachers and educators in tribal schools who've been fired without any explanation. Critical federal funds that are on hold. And when they went to meet with the Department of the Interior today, they were told that even those who are in charge of the very programs that they were meeting them about didn't know what was happening. Back home, people are frightened. They are scared. They don't know if they're going to lose their Social Security, their Medicaid, or the access to life-saving care. A few days ago, I met with the largest food bank in the state of New Mexico. They distribute food to hundreds of food pantries, churches, homeless shelters, and individual families across the state. They told me that if the cuts to food assistance go through that Republicans are proposing in their budget framework, that the number of families, and especially our children and seniors who are currently facing food insecurity, will double. There is not enough support, resources, and infrastructure in the state of New Mexico to meet the need if these programs are cut. Our food system will do everything that it can to support our communities, but it will be more severe than even during the pandemic. And every day, I am hearing from constituents in my district who have lost their jobs. These are real people, real New Mexicans, thousands of Americans who are being fired every single day by this administration for no reason. These are not faceless people, but real members of our communities. A tribal school teacher who was told in the middle of the school day that she was being fired for no reason after she had taught for years, to pack up her things and return home in front of her students. Students who don't know if they're going to be able to finish the school year and graduate. No answers, no explanation, no follow-up for how she's going to support her son and her disabled mother at home. A veteran who was on medical leave, who returned to their job at the VA on a Monday, only to find out that they had been locked out of their email. And inside that email was a nameless, faceless dismissal, letting them know that they had been fired for no reason. A dedicated public servant who drove to work every single day, 60 miles every day to the VA hospital to serve their fellow veterans, who was never even notified as to the reason they were terminated. Just a mass email sent to thousands of federal employees across the United States. And just like the other veterans across my district who lost their jobs over the last several days, another veteran who served in the Army Reserves from 2001 to 2010, who also received that same nameless, faceless email from Elon Musk. A veteran who received an Army Achievement Medal, a Combat Action Badge, and other medals and achievements over the course of their service, who was fired with devastating impacts to their family, not only financially, but emotionally. These are the real people being impacted by this administration. An administration that seems to have no regard whatsoever for the thousands of Americans who are literally losing their livelihoods every day as a result. And while they take on these actions, while they dismantle these federal agencies, while they withhold the funds that literally thousands of organizations across the country depend upon to provide vital services across our communities, while they fire these thousands of federal public servants who have dedicated their life to service, including our veterans and members of the military, they are giving themselves contracts to replace the very programs and create new services that will give them more wealth, like Elon Musk at the FAA. They're talking about monetizing HUD programs. That's right, voucher programs that our lowest income family members and members of our communities depend on. They want to turn it into a monetary program that makes private companies money. They want to turn over mortgage markets to their crypto buddies. Well, that sounds like a good idea, right? And they're doing all of this against the backdrop of trade wars that are not only endangering the American economy, but endangering the lives of millions of Americans and making it more expensive. Now, the thing I ask myself is, what is the end goal of all of this? I mean, seriously, what is the end goal? Donald Trump campaigned for the last 2 years on lowering costs. He told the American people, if you elect me, I will make it cheaper and easier to live in America. And so I want to ask my fellow Americans, is it cheaper than it was 6 weeks ago in America? If you've been grocery shopping over the last several weeks, you are seeing that prices are higher than they have ever been. We're not just talking about the price of eggs and meat, it's everything. The price of housing, the price of groceries, the price of energy. Not only have prices not gone down, they've gone up. And now, because of these tariffs and trade wars, we know that everything is going to get exponentially more expensive. The raw materials that fuel American manufacturing and construction, more expensive. Produce and food, more expensive. Energy, more expensive. What are they doing? Why are they doing this? Why are my colleagues enabling this administration to harm the American people, enabling this administration to put harmful policies in place that are making not only more expensive for Americans, but tanking our economy? What is this all about? To what end? I ask my colleagues, honestly, Mr. Speaker, to what end is all of this? What is the point of hurting real Americans? These policies are not making life better for real Americans. It is really about stealing from the working people of this country to make the wealthier more wealthy. And if you need any more evidence of that, then all you have to do is look at the budget framework that they passed here in this chamber 2 weeks ago. Now, a couple of weeks ago when they passed this budget, they pretended like we're just trying to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And we're going to take those savings and reinvest it into tax breaks and help the American people. But as has passed over the last couple of weeks, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. Over the weekend, Republicans were on a blitz across the news media saying that they were going to gut Medicaid. They're talking about it openly now. They're going to cut hundreds of millions of dollars from the basic programs that sustain Americans. Over the weekend, Elon Musk talked openly about gutting Social Security. This is their plan. And what are they going to do with all of that saving? Quote unquote savings? They're going to use it to give permanent tax breaks to billionaires. That's it. That is what all of this is in service to. Taking from the people who have spent their lives serving this country, proudly serving this nation, proudly working to put food on the table and a roof over their head for their families. And they're going to give that money to billionaires. That's what this is all about. It hurts my heart. My colleagues passed their budget resolution, their budget CR this afternoon, and the vast majority of them are on planes back to their districts, where they are not going to hold town halls. Their leadership told them not to, because they don't want to hear from the people who are unhappy and being hurt by these harms to our communities. So I have to ask my colleagues, why are you even here? What is this all in service of? Go home and represent your people, and come back here and have a backbone to stand up for the Constitution and the people of this country, because real people are being hurt. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Rep. Stansbury, for speaking today and to share how some of Trump's policies are going to harm your constituents. You know, in your state and near your district are national security workers, atomic scientists at Sandia and Los Alamos labs, who were fired and then unfired and are still being threatened with being fired. And I'm a scientist. I know a lot of people that are in that situation. And the damage that's done to our national security when you tell people that working at a national lab, especially a national security lab, is not a safe place in terms of being able to depend on an income to raise your family, that it does damage to our national security that can never be undone. It is not a small deal, and the fact that some 23-year-old kid with a software background is deciding they know more about the workforce that we need to make sure our nuclear weapons are safe and effective is about as bad government as you could even ever imagine. And so that's, and I'd also like to echo your questions about why does Trump do this? Why does he actually do this? The president's reputation, it's based on, as a great businessman, it's based on making a series of one-off deals. And he's a real estate deal maker, not a manufacturer, not a businessman who has real customers. And he thinks he's done a good deal when he uses all the leverage in his negotiation to make sure that he's really rooked his counterparty, his customer, to the extent possible in his real estate transactions. Now, I'm very different. I'm a manufacturer. And the last thing you want if you're a manufacturer is a dissatisfied customer. It's a completely different mindset. And the problem occurs when Donald Trump views our allies as people to be rooked, people to be insulted, people to use the leverage to get the most out of the current situation with them instead of trying to develop the long-term business relationship that is really the basis of the long-term economic security of our country. And that's my best understanding of why the president does these things. Because certainly he has his advisors that let him know that his policies are going to have disastrous economic effects. In fact, just a couple of nights ago in an interview, President Trump declined to rule out the possibility of a recession, which I imagine his competent advisors have been shouting in his ear for weeks now. You know, as I said earlier, there are no winners in a trade war. There are only those who are left to bear the burden of higher costs, lost jobs, and economic instability. Instead of strengthening our economy, Trump and his Republican allies are needlessly putting it at risk, gambling with the livelihoods of American families. So if the U.S. indeed enters a recession, we will know who to blame. I yield back.